Let's get it on then, shall we? Mwah. Welcome to Sex on the Peach, your weekly hump day dose of everyone's favourite untalked about topic, sex. Let's get honest, let's get open, let's get comfortable, and let's get into this week's show. Friends, lovers, listeners, happy Wednesday, happy hump day, and happy Sex on the Peach day. You're probably all like, who? Peach. Don't know her, haven't seen her. No, I did not get shut down for speaking publicly on Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni. And despite the title, this is not an episode about bad dating etiquette. It's about me. Because whilst I would never endorse behaviours like ghosting and leaving people on red, I'm an absolute hypocrite because yes, I have absolutely been ghosting my very own podcast. And I can confirm it's not you, it's me. It's definitely me. I'm the problem, it's me. This has actually not been an intentional break. Not even in the slightest. The fact the last time I recorded an episode was in March is actually kind of wild to me because seriously, where did the time go? This is like when I go to respond to someone and I think they messaged me 3 hours before and it was actually 3 weeks. I feel like I've been gone so long, I borderline need to reintroduce myself. So today is kind of going to be a catch-up episode because, to be honest, I have updates. And as much as I find it weird to be like, hi, I'm back, and this episode is all about me, I actually think and hope that some of the things I'm going to talk about might be kind of helpful. We'll see anyway. Otherwise, it's just me chatting a load of faff for the next however long. So, enjoy that. Let's just get into it, shall we? Here is Left You on Red. Okay, so first things first, this is officially the first episode recorded from Peach's Palace 2.0. I moved house at the end of March, and that was kind of the start of the savage Sex on the Peach ghosting of 2025, which was for no reason other than I had absolutely zero time on my hands, and I can quite confidently say there will not be a Peach's Palace 3.0. This will absolutely be the resting place of Sex on the Peach because I am not doing that again, not least because the entire process just proved to me that misogyny is still alive and kicking in the property industry, especially to a woman who is selling a property and buying another one on her own. I don't think I've ever been questioned about my non-existent husband more. We're really assuming these things in precious 2025 because God forbid a woman be able to handle something herself. Honestly, a wild experience. So to any of my fellow single ladies on that property ladder, you have my thoughts and condolences because you will feel like you jumped on a very unsexy train back to the 1950s for a hot minute when women couldn't even get a mortgage on their own. But anyway, the house move was very stressful and a very overwhelming time, and it was coupled with finishing up my academic year, which was a lot more hectic than I ever thought it would be. And that came to a head a couple of weeks ago. And life has just been a lot. Every time I also thought about recording a podcast episode, I couldn't even find my mic for like weeks because my life was just boxes and more boxes. And I don't know if this sounds a bit silly, but the world is depressing at the moment. Just extremely heavy and extremely depressing. I don't know about the rest of you, but I feel that quite deeply. And then sometimes I feel like it's so silly and trivial to get on a mic and talk about sex and relationships as if the world isn't literally kind of crumbling beneath our feet and there aren't bigger things to worry about. But I am aware that's really stupid because sex and relationships are things we are all dealing with in our very real daily lives. And they, of course, need care and attention and thought. That's all really important. I, of all people, believe that. I think I just get in my head and I feel like what I'm contributing right now to society and to the world isn't good enough, or not even not good enough, just not enough in general. And admittedly, this break was never intended to be this long. I knew I didn't have much time through my house move. I knew I didn't have much time as my academic year was closing down. But each week it then came to record and something was holding me back. And I'd rather be honest about that because honesty is always the most important thing to me. And I think I just felt like I'd go to sit down and make some notes or find my mic. And it was almost as if I rolled my eyes at my own podcast because I was like, no one needs to hear this right now. I'm also conscious that if I'm in a terrible headspace and absolutely not being anything close to my best self, that it just might not be the best time to try and create educational content to put out to people. So I've taken a moment now to reset and I've gotten over myself because the fact is, I really care about people and about sex and about relationships. I do want to keep opening up these conversations. I do want to keep helping where I can. I do want to keep this safe and non-judgmental space open for everyone to feel their feels and deal with whatever shit they're going through with the comfort of knowing they aren't alone. I'm also like, shit, I didn't work this fucking hard to get this thing into the global top 5% of podcasts to let it all go to shit. So hi, I'm back. I am back. I've got you and I'm not a ghosting fuckboy, I promise. And one reason I wanted to use this episode for a bit of a catch up is because of probably the biggest update in terms of resonating with this podcast. I am dating someone. I am in a relationship with a man. Thoughts and prayers welcome. Terrible news for anyone who enjoyed my single life stories and oversharing, I know. And listen, it also feels extremely homophobic to be saying I am in a relationship with a man during Pride Month, no less. The audacity. Maybe I should have waited one more extra week to release this because I'm just about waiting for my sexuality to be called into question, like it seems to be for every queer person that finds themselves in a heterosexual relationship. Don't think I haven't seen that playing out in the media as of late, and I'm aggressively not okay with it because let me reassure you, I am still pansexual as fuck, and if anyone needs reminding what that means, It means you are attracted to person over gender. It's truly giving the heart wants what it wants. Now, I did not see being in a relationship as being on my 2025 bingo card, but it's happening. And what's interesting is, since I really started studying sex and relationships in depth, I have been single. Like, since I made the decision this was a career path I wanted to follow, since I started this podcast, all of that has happened alongside me being very, very single. And although a lot of my thoughts and guidance and content come from relationships I have had in the past, it has been over 4 years since I was in a relationship. And as probably expected, I'm a very different person to who I was the last time I was with someone. A, because I'm just a different person in a lot of ways, in general, to the person I was then. B, I've gotten extremely used to being single and not making space for a person in my life in a relationship sense. And also, I was happy living that way, so it's an adjustment. And C, I'm a lot more educated on relationships and sex and everything that comes with it than the last time I was with someone in a relationship way, because I've literally spent the last 4 years dedicating my life to studying it. So does that mean I'm now perfect in a relationship? Absolutely not. And I hope this episode helps anyone who might be navigating a relationship after being single for a long time, who might be navigating weird shit that comes up from previous relationships that you thought was long gone. For anyone who is learning who they are in a relationship, for anyone who might think, what would Peach say? Listen, it has actually thrown a lot of things up for me that I didn't anticipate. And whilst I don't believe in perfection, we are all learning and growing all the time. I did back myself to know how to handle things probably a bit more succinctly than I have been at times. So, you can train yourself to be an expert in all the knowledge out there, but applying it to your own life can sometimes be a completely different ball game. So just to comfort you all, I am sometimes still extremely clueless in the actual living moment. And as always, we are all in this together. Apparently, what would Peach say and what would Peach do are at complete odds with one another sometimes. However, I know the burning question on everyone's minds right now. Is this man a 5'10", 5'11" musical theatre boy? And the answer is a resounding no. Listen, you will all hold a very special place in my heart that will never ever change, my sweet, sweet angels. But it's time to say goodbye, because this man has never ever been to the theatre. He's never been to the theatre. I mean, I'm kind of here for it, because I'm here for not having to talk about auditions, because I'm still not entirely convinced he knows what that is. A job interview where you have to sing at people. Sure. He's also 6'4", an entire whole foot taller than me. So it's giving I have to stand on a step, otherwise I'm getting neck ache. Now, we know I respect anonymity on this podcast, and that will not be changing for now, just because this is a person I am actively involved with. So I will be henceforth referring to him as Jack Reacher, who is, for anyone who doesn't know, my literary crush. If you've read the Lee Child series, you'll get it. Not the Tom Cruise version of this character, FYI, like the movie, because he is quite literally the antithesis of everything this character was ever described to be in the books. But anyway, I'm dating my literary crush. So we've been dating now for about 3 months, and I can't lie to you all, he is one of the kindest people I've ever met in my actual life. Like, I don't even get it. I don't understand where this man has come from, because I haven't seen a red flag as of yet. Now, the way we met is kind of wild. I've never really been one for a cliche or a usually meaningless one-liner like, it will happen when you least expect it. But the weird shit that had to align for that to even happen is weird. So I don't know if anyone else is on this group on Facebook, but it's called Are We Dating the Same Guy? London. There's like loads of different groups depending on where you live, but I think the London one is one of the biggest. And let me tell you, it is like the Wild West on there. Someone will post that they've been seeing someone for like 3 or 4 months and they are planning on making it official. And they will check in the group if there's any tea that they should know about this man they're talking about, complete with photo. And someone will literally respond, that's my husband. We have 3 kids together. It is absolutely batshit crazy on there. People will post the text conversations they've had with men from apps asking for advice. And what I'm going to say is, if that is how people are talking to each other, then the scope of dating looks fucking rough out there. Like, if I had been actively looking to date, I actually think this group would have put me off for life. But I've been on it for a while because I like to, for education's sake, of course, understand what dating culture is like at the moment so that I can relate to things that people talk to me about if they are on the apps, if they are looking for a partner, etc., etc. And I'd like to hope the stuff that gets posted on this group is like the bottom of the barrel, because if it isn't, then I legitimately do not even know what to say, because the way people are being treated with zero respect and the absolute bare minimum that women out there are excusing, it all makes me borderline furious. Like, this group is a hot mess. Like, I feel for the women on there. I can hardly bear it. I'm massively digressing. Let me get back on the topic anyway. If you are on the apps, if you are dating people and you want to check in, Are We Dating the Same Guy London? By all means, join the group. You will see for yourself what I mean. So, back to the story. The only reason I really even go on Facebook is to check on some of the university groups I'm in if I have a question or I need some advice. So this one evening I log on, and because I'm a member of Are We Dating the Same Guy London, another group came up as a suggested post. And this group was called Vouched For, or something like that. Vouched For, Vouched Dating, Vouched London, something like that. And this is like the polar opposite as a group. Like, if one of my best friends was looking for a partner and was fed up of the apps, I could post them on this group and list all of the amazing things I think about them and be like, yo, if any of y'all want to date them, message me and I'll hook you up. I mean, I'm not sure I'd exactly say that, but you get my drift. It's a way to just put your friends out there, you know? So anyway, God, I feel like there's so much context needed for this story. Because I was part of the Are We Dating the Same Guy group, and also because the person who had written this post on Vouched For that I happened to see actually had a bunch of mutual friends with me, this post came up on my feed about the man who shall now be known as Jack Reacher. And one of his female friends had written this beautiful post about him. And that's actually what struck me the most. I was like, damn, what a lovely friend to take the time to write something so gorgeous about this friend of theirs. Also, side note, now knowing him, I actually cannot believe he allowed this post to be written and posted. And he says there was a lot of reluctance on his part when it happened, but hey, I guess he's glad it happened now, lol. Anyway, this really lovely post about him had been written, listing about 1 million beautiful qualities, most importantly, dog lover, about this man. And to her credit, she wasn't lying or exaggerating. They are all absolutely true. And she included some photos. I was like, shit, he's cute. And I literally thought, aw. And then I wrote some speedy, flippant Hunger Games reference on the post. Also actually quite out of character for me to even comment on a random post on social media. I logged off Facebook and didn't think much else of it. Then a while later, I went back to check on the question I'd posted in my uni group, and I had a notification about the Jack Reacher post, basically saying other people had commented on it. Sure, fine. I clicked on it, and I was one of 168 comments on this fucking post. So now, all of a sudden, I'm apparently part of the Facebook Bachelor waiting to be given a fucking rose. I was like, not this. How have I landed myself in this position? Although, listen, I was like, if he goes on a date with every single responder, that would make one hell of a story. Also, what a fucking ego boost for him, to be fair. So anyway, his friend who had put up the post had been sending him the people who had responded. The way reliving this story is an absolute fucking lol. And he had responded to her saying he had messaged me on Instagram. And the rest is history, friends. No, listen, I'm not going to lie. I don't think I was expecting anything to come of it. I don't think he really was either. Who knew your dream partner could be hiding in a group on Facebook? 2025 really threw me a curveball with this one. But we got talking, couldn't really stop talking. At one point, he threw in the statement, "Society is broken." And I was like, oh, I'm in. Another time, he went on a rant about Andrew Tate and about incels. And I was like, oh, shit. Okay. And then he absolutely secured it with a tirade about the disparity between the lack of rape convictions and harsh sentences for much lesser crimes. And I was like, oh, holy fuck. I think I'm probably in love now because this man is giving social intelligence and isn't afraid to talk about it. Like, sorry, bro, but where did you even come from? We all know by now that obviously I was put here to yap, and I love a deep debate about the inner workings of society and the patriarchy and misogyny, and this man is bringing these conversations to the table without me even mentioning them yet. Sign me up. I am in. But I think it's important to say, I think deep down, for the first couple of months, I was waiting for him to give me any reason for me to be like, I'm out. I don't know if anyone has seen that TikTok video by the account Get to the Point Bro, But any of my single ladies out there, you need to watch it because it's basically a sum up of the way women feel when they've been single for a long time. And he absolutely nailed what it's like to date a woman who has been happily single for a while. He says, dating a girl who is used to being alone is not romance. It's an extreme sport for your self-esteem. Iconic. And he compares a single woman's life to a peaceful little empire where this new guy is basically a tourist. I mean, my favorite part is when he says she might cancel date night just to deep clean her place, eat sushi in silence, and do a 12-step skincare routine. Not because she doesn't like you, but because she likes herself more. And honestly, same. It's hilarious, but also deeply real. You're not competing with other men. You're competing with a weighted blanket and the joy of being left alone. So I watched that TikTok and I felt seen because honestly, that's exactly what it's like when you have been happily single for so long. You've got your empire, your routines, your peaceful little world, and then suddenly someone new is in it. And the hardest part is adjusting those boundaries, not because you don't like that person, but because your self-care and your me time suddenly feel like these sacred rituals that no one can mess with. And it's a really interesting balance to try and strike, letting someone into your world without feeling like you are losing the peace that you've worked really hard to create. And I have loved being single the past 4 years. I have been truly happy and truly content, and also put a lot of work into trying to help other single women feel the same, because I understand that can be a journey. And that doesn't change just because my situation has changed. I will still be continuing to do that because my single years were some of the happiest of my life. So I am not even slightly exaggerating when I say I was just waiting for something to happen to be like, oh, sorry, I simply must return to my single life now. But he has given me absolutely zero reason to do that. In fact, he just handles literally every situation impeccably. It is infuriating, but I think one of the good things is that he was also really enjoying his life. And so we both came at this from a place of being very happy independently. And therefore, there would be no point for us to continue to pursue it if it wasn't adding something to our lives that we were already very happy with. And that's definitely how it feels at the moment. And I'm not saying everyone has to approach their relationship like that, but that's definitely the place we were both coming from. And given that in the past, when I entered relationships, they were usually hot off the back of another relationship, this definitely felt like the healthiest place I've been in whilst entering into something new. But I also thought I'm so far removed from my past relationships and everything that went down in them, and I can talk about them so candidly to friends on this podcast. Like, I can relive fairly traumatic experiences and they don't have an emotional impact on me anymore. That surely those relationships and experiences aren't going to rear their ugly heads in this relationship 500 years later. Aw, wrong. I'm a fierce advocate of not blaming a new partner for something an old partner did. and also of taking responsibility for our own triggers. So this whole thing has required me to be extremely self-aware and also extremely vulnerable, which is something I constantly encourage other people to do because it's very important that we are. But honestly, I sometimes find it hard to do myself because I've always considered myself fiercely independent and find it extremely difficult to ask for help, something I am personally always working on. Now, one thing that I am extremely sensitive about is how a partner reacts when I am ill. And that might sound extremely niche, but I have sadly had multiple long-term partners deal with very serious female issues really poorly. And I want to be mature and say men aren't necessarily educated on how to deal with women's health issues because there's a lack of medical knowledge on them in general. But honestly, fuck those guys. They were some of the worst cretins to ever walk the earth. So they don't deserve that grace, actually. I think I've used one of the examples before, but when I was going through some extremely bad cysts on my ovaries and they suspected they may be cancerous, I was advised not to have sex or to have a bath or to use tampons, all the usuals when you're going through something like that as a vulva owner. And knowing this, after I think 3 days of no sexual activity, my partner at the time said, well, there's nothing wrong with your mouth. Now, we know that I am live by the oral, die by the oral. I will always happily pleasure my partner, even if I can't necessarily receive pleasure. Like, I don't see sex as a business transaction. But it was the fact I was extremely scared, in bad pain and discomfort, and sex was just expected from me. And if it had been brought up in a kind or respectful manner, completely different. But it was brought up as entitled and expected, which made me never want to give the prick a blowjob ever again. But essentially, he did not support me through that time of ill health. And that has unfortunately been a bit of a running theme between a couple of my partners because they saw me as a body that provides sex and saw that as being more important than a woman, than their partner going through a cancer scare. So I had become mildly convinced that this was just a space in which I was always going to feel let down by a partner because it sadly happened a few times. There's a reason I'm talking about all of this. And I've got a funny but kind of painful story. And since I talk about sexual health all the time, it's pretty ironic that this has now happened to me. It's giving irresponsible on my part, I know, how dare I, but I never claim to be perfect. We all know I'm very open to my mistakes and very open to the times that I fall short on my own advice. So, towards the beginning of our relationship, Jack Reacher and I were due to see each other, and I was like, just letting you know, I'm on my period. As we all know, I've spoken before about period sex not being my thing. Huge advocate for it, for anyone who feels good with it, but it just doesn't feel physically good for me because everything feels too sensitive and not in a cute way. It's just kind of painful. Anyway, he came back letting me know he wasn't sure if he had a cold sore or not because he used to get them as a kid, but hasn't had one in years, or if he had just split his lip because he's currently training for a trail ultra marathon. Of course he fucking is. Sure. You go for it, babe. I'll see you at the end with a drink. But anyway, he's training on trails. It's giving dry. It's giving British desert. It's giving more dehydrated than me, who hasn't drunk water since about 1997. So, was it a cold sore or was it a split lip from the training? He wasn't sure, but I appreciated that he was direct and upfront with me about his previous experience with cold sores. And I was like, no problem. We're both out of action. It's fine. We'll cuddle. And the thought of that was tough because the guy is a kisser. And we all know I'm obsessed with a fucking snog, with a makeout session. Anyway, when we saw each other, we just should never have seen each other. We know where this is going. When we saw each other that evening, I was like, that's not a cold sore. No way. That is a mild split lip. Now, was that wishful, irresponsible thinking on my part? Maybe. But it truly looked like the way your lip might crack the tiniest bit in the winter, in the nightmare that is British winter. You know what it's like. Your lips get dry, they crack a tiny, tiny bit. It looked like that. Like it was tiny. I was like, surely this is fine. We can sneak a quick kiss and it's fine. It's going to be fine. He was like, are you sure? I was like, it's fine. If only I knew how not fine I was about to be. Friends, do not risk it. Because a few days later, I started feeling a little off. It was not cute. My mouth felt really fucking weird. And then my gums started swelling. Like I couldn't even put my retainers in at night. Then I noticed a few small blisters forming on the inside of my cheeks and my gums. And I get ulcers in my mouth if I'm stressed or run down. So I was like, maybe I'm just coming down with something. But let me tell you, the pain hit fast. It was like the worst, most intense ulcers you can imagine, and then 1,000,000 times more painful. Just eating and drinking felt like fucking torture. I was literally crying full tears every time I had to brush my teeth. I felt so pathetic. I literally had like 50 plus blisters inside my mouth. And I was like, what the actual fucking fuck is happening? So naturally, I went down the Google rabbit hole. And to my surprise, I found out what I had actually caught wasn't just some regular cold sore from HSV1, which he had obviously told me he has, and which is what I always thought was the only culprit behind oral herpes. I thought you could only get a cold sore from a cold sore. Obviously, I know if someone has a cold sore and they give you oral sex down there, of course, that's how you can catch HSV2. But in terms of cold sore to mouth, I was like, you might catch a cold sore, right? That's what you might get. You might also get HSV1. You might get a cold sore, which, you know, I didn't necessarily really want either, but I genuinely didn't think it was a risk. I really thought this was a split lip. Anyway, I'm digressing. What I didn't know was you can actually catch this fucking demon infection from hell called herpetic gingiva stomatitis. I don't even know if I'm pronouncing that right. We'll go with that. If there's any doctors listening to me, feel free to correct me, but it's literally just so many syllables. I'm going with what I've got. I had never even heard of it before. And I certainly did not think this was something that was going to be caused by kissing someone who maybe had a cold sore. Before this happened, I honestly only knew about the sexual repercussions of HSV1. Like, again, cold sores. Not fucking herpetic gingiva stomatitis. I did a whole episode on STIs and didn't even mention this infection because I didn't even know it existed until I found out myself when I was dealing with it. And I always assumed cold sores were, yes, kind of a pain because you need to take a sexual break until that outbreak has passed. But they are mostly a cosmetic pain, like annoying as fuck, but manageable. But after experiencing the pain, the swelling, the fever from this infection, it was a huge wake-up call that there's a lot more to this infection than I'd realized. And I have to be honest, I follow a lot of sexual health accounts, and not once have I seen this mentioned as a potential outcome of kissing someone with HSV1. It's a good reminder that even when we're talking about something we think we know well, there's always more to learn. Every day is a school day, no matter how educated I am about sexual health. Apparently, I'm still missing stuff. And even though we'd had the conversation between us about his past cold sores, nothing could have prepared us for how ill it made me. Like, I learned just how uncomfortable it can be to catch this virus. So if you are considering risking kissing someone with a cold sore, don't. Even if you're like, maybe it's just a split lip because they're training for an ultra marathon, don't. Just wait until it has passed, because this infection was up there with the most ill and miserable I have ever felt in my life. It was honestly horrendous, and I couldn't eat solids for over a week. And it wasn't just the blisters, it was the mouth swelling, the through the roof fever, and honestly the complete lack of desire to kiss anyone again for at least a week. Honestly, it's fucking hideous. But it is also a great reason to be upfront with your partner about things like cold sores, because even if they seem mild, if you get cold sores, do not risk giving this infection to any of your sexual partners, because it is awful. And trust me, you do not want to inflict that kind of pain on another person. It is better safe than sorry. So we learned our lesson the hard way. I have not had a cold sore, by the way. So a cold sore did not happen as a result of the kissing. I just got the infection. And yes, I know it was partly on him that I ended up so sick. But let me tell you, as soon as I got ill, the way my walls went up because of my previous experiences of being ill around men was a lot. I literally shut down and got very emotionally cold. I was like, oh shit, okay. This still clearly really affects me and is something I still feel extremely sensitive about. And I genuinely believe that this is maybe just how men are when it comes to female health. But I have been proved wrong, because I couldn't have felt more looked after. And this whole situation has really forced me to confront just how deeply I was carrying those old wounds from past relationships. You know, in previous relationships, being ill wasn't just physically hard, it became quite emotionally brutal. There were times when I felt like I was being punished for being vulnerable, like being sick was a burden they didn't want to deal with. So when I got sick this time, even though it was for something completely different to what I've experienced before, I braced myself. And expected that same coldness or neglect because, frankly, I thought that's just what happens. But what actually happened was so different. And honestly, it caught me off guard because instead of feeling brushed aside, I felt genuinely cared for. I was looked after with kindness and patience, and it slowly chipped away at that protective armor I'd built over years of hurt. So this experience has, in its own positive way, opened my eyes to the fact that those patterns don't have to define my reality anymore. Just because I was treated badly before in this area, it doesn't mean that's how every relationship has to go. So I'm having to learn that I can let go of that fear and that burden of expecting to be dismissed or mistreated when I'm vulnerable. It's quite a profound relief to realize that being sick, being unwell, a time when you most need support, doesn't have to be a time of emotional isolation or loneliness within your relationship, which is terrifying on its own to be with someone and feel lonely within that. And, you know, that lesson extends beyond just being ill. It touches on all of those heavy, painful experiences that I have carried from past relationships. So for the first time in a long time, I feel like I'm starting to unburden myself from those fears and open up space for something different or something better, really, because I haven't had to do that because I've been single for such a long time. And it's messy and it's slow work. It's not necessarily easy. And it definitely doesn't happen overnight. But experiences like this show me that pushing through that discomfort can actually lead to something really positive, to some positive change and confronting things that I haven't had to before because the situation hasn't called for me to. So that's something that I am actively learning as we go, and I will keep talking to you about it in case anyone else is dealing with anything similar. Now, something I have found myself regularly having to navigate is actually nothing to do with him and everything to do with everyone else. So a while back in season 1, I did an episode called Is Monogamy Not For Me?, where I dug into how monogamy can be really challenging, not just as a concept, but in the messy real life practice of it. And that episode included me trying to untangle my own feelings about commitment, exclusivity, and what it means to really connect with someone over time. And honestly, I still stand by a lot of what I said then. I don't think monogamy should be the default. I think it's something that should be discussed and decided. I don't think it's the easiest path for everyone, and it definitely hasn't always been the right choice for me. But as I spoke about in that episode, I also don't feel the need to slap a specific label on myself, like polyamorous or non-monogamous. I think my relationship style is extremely fluid, which means I want to approach every relationship as its own unique thing. I want to meet each partner where we are and figure out together what works best for us in that moment without forcing it into a predefined box. And as I say about anything and everything, I maintain the right to change my mind at any time, and I respect anyone else's right to do so as well. But what's been frustrating and honestly kind of exhausting is that now I'm in a new relationship. One of the first questions from a lot of people has been, so are you open? And when I say, no, we are choosing to be monogamous because that feels right for us, people have reacted like it's some kind of plot twist. You know, they are surprised or skeptical or immediately jump in with, but I thought you were poly, which is wild because I've never confirmed that label. I talk openly about fluidity and exploring different possibilities, but in that respect, I've made a point of not declaring a fixed identity. In fact, I've discussed how unnecessary doing that can be. I understand that we choose labels to make sense of things for ourselves, but there is also so much freedom in not confining to a label and just being like, I don't fucking know, which I'm pretty sure is almost verbatim what I said on that episode. Yet somehow, once you get associated with a word like poly in people's minds, they treat monogamy like a betrayal or a denial of your true self. It feels like people want to pin you down, to put you in a neat category. And when you refuse to stay there, they get uncomfortable or judgmental, even though it's not their life or relationship to live or exist in. And it's especially frustrating because I've worked really hard to create a safe, non-judgmental space here on this podcast, a space where people can explore their desires and relationships in whatever way feels right for them at that moment. And yet when it comes to my own life, I don't always get that same grace. It's like the rules suddenly shift and the open-mindedness that I encourage others to practice doesn't always get extended back to me. And that's a hard pill to swallow, but it also makes me more determined to keep holding that space. Yes, for all of us, but also for myself because I clearly need it. Now, what helps me feel grounded in this new chapter is that my partner and I have agreed to keep the dialogue open, to keep checking in with each other about how we're feeling, what we need, and whether that structure still works for us, whether all of the things we're doing still work for us. That ongoing conversation feels really important because it acknowledges that relationships aren't static and that it's okay for things to evolve over time. You know, it's not about sealing ourselves into one box forever. It's just about staying honest and curious and making sure that the way we show up for each other matches where we are at emotionally and physically. If people outside of our relationship struggle to hold that space, that's on their limited view, to be honest. Fluidity is about freedom and respect. It's not about meeting anyone else's expectations. I maintain that I am fluid in the same way that I maintain that I am pansexual, which is a label that I do feel happy to identify with. Choosing monogamy with this partner doesn't mean I'm denying any of my values or that I'm afraid of intimacy in any way. It just means that this is the right relationship structure for us right now. Like, who fucking knows what the future could bring? He might meet someone he is wildly attracted to tomorrow and be like, shit, what do I do? And we will discuss it. Maybe it will never change. Maybe this will always work for us. And either way, we will discuss it. And either way, it will be okay. Because what matters in any relationship is that the people involved feel respected, fulfilled, and aligned, not that everyone else understands or approves. At the end of the day, the only people we really need to answer to are ourselves and each other. And it's wild that I'm now in a position where saying, yeah, I'm going to be monogamous with a partner elicits a reaction that it would have more likely been on the flip side. You know, if this had been a year ago, 2 years ago, if you would say to people, I'm going to be in an open relationship, people were reacting with skepticism and surprise. So it is kind of wild to me that this has been the reaction. But if this is a question that you were thinking of asking me, if it's a question that you were thinking of judging me on, there are your answers. Please give me the same grace that I offer literally everyone on this podcast. I have said from the get-go, I want the opportunity to navigate every relationship in my life as it comes with my partner at the time. I maintain the right to change my mind about how I feel about anything at any time, and I respect anyone else's right to change their mind. So please don't let any preconceived notions get in the way of that, because I'm happy, and that's the most important thing, right? That's what I want for all of you. So hopefully that's what y'all can all want for me too. I'm sure that a question on anyone's mind who is listening is probably, but what about the sex? Tell us what we actually want to know, for fuck's sake. So let's get into it. This is probably one of the first times in my life that I did not have sex on a first date. Complete side note, by the way. I'll try not to digress too much more. But our first date was at a place called Fair Game in Canary Wharf in London. And to be honest, they should be paying me for the amount of times I recommended it, because I genuinely believe it's a perfect place for a first date, because there's food, there's drinks, it's casual, but it's fun. And then there's all these games that you would have played at the fair. Duh, stating the obvious, given the name. But like, if you were on a date where the conversation is icky or difficult, you can distract yourself with the games. So I'd highly recommend it for anyone who finds first dates awkward, which they absolutely can be. Luckily, that wasn't the case for this particular first date. It was really giving Yap City, but we only kissed. My gosh, can you believe it? I mean, we live a little bit away from each other, and who knows what the eventuality would have been if that wasn't the case. But yeah, we actually didn't have sex until we saw each other for the third time. And I have to be honest, this is a man who had shown himself to be very considerate and very attentive in conversation. So I was like, I have high hopes that these are qualities that will translate to the bedroom. I will always maintain that I never necessarily think that the first time with someone new is going to be the best sex you'll have with that person, because you are literally spending that first time figuring out the logistics of a new person's body. And that in itself is a fucking minefield, because every body is so different. But I just had this gut feeling that this was going to be someone who was attentive and cared about my pleasure. And friends, lovers, listeners, I'm happy to report that I was correct. Obviously, he is aware of the fact that I speak about sex publicly and I study it. And so we'd had many conversations about it prior. But I was like, I just feel like this is going to be someone who is paying attention. And I'm obviously thrilled that I was right. Communication is truly lubrication, as my favorite Dr. Emily would say. In fact, I might have actually, and this is extremely rare for me, met someone who has a higher sex drive than me. Now, before you feel any kind of joy for me on this matter, this is where we take a pause, because this actually comes with its own issue. Now, it's not always the case that just because someone is very tall and has big hands and big feet and all of the big things, that everything is in proportion. But in this case, with this person, it very much is. Now, I've done many an episode where I've discussed the does size matter conversation. And if anyone has listened to me talk about this before, I've been honest about the fact that size can matter for me, just not in the way everyone else seems to suggest. Listen, I'm a compact, shallow gal down there. She's not the most accommodating of angels. She's giving very little room at the inn energy. So our actual physical genitalia are not the most likely of companions. They weren't immediately the best of friends, shall we say. They were like, we really want to be pals, but first we got to work some stuff out because at the moment, the friends are having little disagreements. And this is actually a tough logistical thing to iron out, especially at the beginning of a relationship where, yes, you do want to rip each other's clothes off all the time, and there's a lot of heightened sexual energy. And it's like, hold on, babe, I just need to take some deep breaths and pray to a God that I don't even believe in, that everything's going to be okay when you enter me. Like, I don't want to be partaking in a calming meditation every time my partner penetrates me, you know? Luckily, our foreplay game is strong and like only getting better and better. The sex toys have been out of their drawer as much when we're together as when I'm on my own. Like, he's a sex toy supporter. We immediately know this is a huge green flag because remember, listeners, they are your companions, not your competition. But seriously, penetration has been a challenge. And yes, it has probably brought us closer connection-wise because we've very much worked together to start to overcome it. And, you know, we're all human and our bodies are just doing what bodies do. But in the idealist of worlds, it's not what you want to be dealing with at the very beginning of a new relationship. Like, I want to be ready to go when we want to go, not be dealing with fucking micro tears and thrush every other time we have penetrative sex, which is very much not it. And I'm also like, wow, vulva owners really have to take the brunt of fucking everything, don't they? So we have to find ways to make it work. And that involves a lot of lube, a slow entrance, even if we are het up and would naturally go at things a bit faster if the size disparity wasn't an issue. And we have to at least start in certain positions that feel easier and more manageable. And, you know, we have to constantly kind of check in. And whilst that's all a bit of a process and people might be like, that sounds really unsexy, when you really want to have sex with your partner, you find the ways to make it work. And that just becomes sexy, I guess. I mean, literally anything is sexier than thrush and a torn fucking vagina anyway. But all of those things are really helping. And so now that side of things is also only progressing in a positive way. So I hope it is of some comfort to anyone listening that I too have issues I have to manage and work through in the sexual side of my life, even though it's something I can talk about confidently and offer answers and guidance about. There are things that crop up in my own sex life where I'm like, okay, well, that needs looking at. And again, it has taken both of us to be communicative and willing to work on it because We want to. And I know this is someone who wouldn't get any pleasure out of having sex with me if I was in pain, because if anyone out there is experiencing something similar with their partner or partners, sex is not supposed to be painful. Just me out here reminding you of that. If it is painful, that needs addressing. Unless it's pain that you are actively seeking that brings you pleasure. Of course, that's a different thing. But if we are talking about sex in general, it is not supposed to hurt. And if it is, please have a conversation about it. Maybe even something you've heard from my experience today can help. Something else I've noticed in this new relationship and didn't fully anticipate is how hesitant I've become around text sex and sending nudes. Years ago, I was way more relaxed and playful with that stuff. I mean, we've probably all heard the season finale story about the sext story that was saved in my notes and sent to multiple people. But just in general, sexting felt fun and flirty and powerful, and nudes were something I would send without thinking too much about because I felt confident and in control. But now, even though the desire is still there, I can feel myself freezing up when it comes to actually pressing send. It's like my body remembers what it felt like to be exposed in the wrong way. I've probably spoken about it before, but just in case I haven't, an ex of mine once posted a video of us to a porn site, and it was extremely difficult to get taken down. And the whole thing was done completely without my consent. I've also had exes forward my nudes onto people. You know, I've trusted people with that part of me who have used it against me later, or shared without my consent, or just handled carelessly. And even though the person I'm with now hasn't done anything to make me feel unsafe, they've actually been really respectful, and I've told them about all of this and they get it. That muscle memory is still there. And it's frustrating because part of me wants to go there. I miss the playfulness of that level of erotic exchange, because I can get into it and I can say so much, but then I get to a point where I'm like, that's enough if it's over a screen and there's proof of it, because there's this protective part of me that's just not ready to fully relax into that yet. And that's something I'm going to have to actively work through, because it's not his fault that I'm there in my head. It's a trigger from my past. That's my responsibility to deal with, even though it was essentially created by other people. And I don't feel like I need to force myself into doing it, into feeling like I'm, I don't know, more available or more sexy. I just need to figure out what safety actually feels like in this version of myself with this person. You know, it's such a weird thing how you can feel confident in your sexuality and still bump up against these internal barriers that just weren't there before. I think it's just one of the realities of intimacy after hurt, learning how to tell the difference between your intuition and your fear, and taking your time figuring out which parts of you are ready to be seen again. So basically, what I'm learning is being in a new relationship after years of being single comes with some real adjustments. And that's also massively the case when it comes to sex. When you've spent a long time having casual or short-term encounters, you get really good at tuning in to yourself. You know what you like, you know how to check in with your boundaries in real time, and you learn to stay present with your own desire without necessarily being responsible for someone else's emotional world. And there's kind of a clarity in that. But then suddenly you're sleeping with someone more than once. You're getting to know their body. They're getting to know yours. And things that didn't come up when it was just a one night stand or something casual start surfacing. Like when we first started having sex and it was painful for me. And I found myself worrying about that way more than I expected. Not just physically, but emotionally. I was like, what if this feels like too much work? What if I can't get past this fast enough? Even though I know better, like I truly know better. I know pain during sex isn't something to be ashamed of. I know it's something to work through together. I know it's not something to hide or apologize for, but still, that anxiety crept in. I was more in my head than in my body, worried that I was somehow disrupting the flow or making things difficult, even though he was being really kind and really fucking patient. That's the stuff that surfaces when you're suddenly having sex with someone consistently that you care about in that way. Those internal stories, those old fears, the pressure you didn't realize you still carried. And it's confronting because even when you've done a lot of work, there's always another layer to meet when intimacy deepens, and it's not always obvious. Sometimes the shifts are tiny, like you sort of go along with something you're kind of lukewarm about because it made them make that noise last time. Sometimes it's bigger, like realizing you're not actually as relaxed as you used to be because this person's opinion suddenly matters to you. There's also the fact that safety and consistency, which are beautiful things, can weirdly make sex more vulnerable, not less. When someone sees you more than once, when they start to care about you, when they ask real questions and stick around for the answers, it can feel like there's more at stake. It's not about sex necessarily getting better just because it's in a relationship, but it does massively shift. There's more time, there's more context, there's more potential for the edges of your shame or your insecurities or your past patterns to show up. And like I said, that can be really confronting, even when everything is technically going well. So I think it's important to name that. I think it's important to be gentle with yourself when those old feelings pop up, like pressure or feelings of performance, which we know I'm vehemently against, or fear of rejection. And I'm trying to stay grounded in the tools that I know, in the tools that we discuss on here pretty much every episode. Checking in with your body, saying what you need, asking for clarity, staying present instead of trying to manage the other person's experience. Just because it's a new context, it doesn't mean you've lost access to all of the skills you built when you were single. You're not starting over. You're just meeting a new layer of yourself in a different kind of intimacy. So, yeah, a lot has shifted. A lot is still shifting. And I'm honestly just out here trying to keep up with myself. I'm accidentally in a relationship. And despite thinking I was being super chill and low key about it, this episode is clearly a full hard launch. I'm still out here getting completely blindsided by my own reactions. Like, hi, who let me be emotionally vulnerable again? And I figured if I'm having a full existential spiral over things like, why does consistent eye contact during sex suddenly make me panic? Then maybe some of you are too. And maybe this helps us all feel a little less weird about it. Because navigating intimacy after being single for ages is awkward, it's confronting, it's great, it's slightly deranged. I don't know. Honestly, sometimes I'm still not even convinced I wanted to be back in a relationship, but I do know one thing, and that is that I want to be with him. So that's where we're at. A soft launch into a new version of emotional chaos from me, and a hard launch into explaining to my listeners that no, I haven't gone full trad wife. I just happen to have a boyfriend now. And don't worry, just because I'm not single anymore doesn't mean I'm running out of fun stories, because it turns out being in a relationship is full of awkward, hilarious moments too. So buckle up, I guess, because you're sure as hell coming along for the ride. Friends, lovers, listeners, to end, a cute little funny story. So about 3 weeks into me and Jack Reacher dating, we were walking my dogs near my new house, and this lovely, lovely girl, her name is Olivia, so hi Olivia if you are listening, stopped me and said, "Are you Peach? I absolutely love your podcast." I mean, for a second, I was absolutely thrilled, because what on earth? But he immediately looks at me like I'm some kind of underground celebrity. And I immediately start panicking that I'm going to get cancelled for being seen in public holding hands with a man. Like, I've spent years telling single sex stories into this mic. Now I'm just out here walking in daylight with a boyfriend. It felt illegal. So this episode might have felt like a bit of a random one, as it is kind of just me giving an update on where I'm at. But I legitimately felt like I needed to do that, because even though I've spent years thinking about, studying, and talking about relationships and sex, actually navigating a new relationship myself is bringing up challenges I didn't totally expect. And I figured maybe sharing that real, messy, sometimes confusing experience might be helpful for listeners who are in the same boat, or maybe just to remind everyone that no matter how clued up you are, real life always finds a way to keep you on your toes. I literally feel like I'm learning a new language that I forgot I knew. So thanks for hanging out with me again, forgiving me for ghosting, and hearing me talk through this weird, wonderful, complicated stuff. Hopefully it's as helpful for you to hear it as it is for me to say it out loud. I will be back really soon with yet another conversation about sex and relationships. I promise I will not be ghosting again. I might be off the market, but I'm back on the mic. Thanks for coming. Thank you for tuning in to Sex on the Peach today, and I hope that you enjoyed this week's episode. You can find and follow me on Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok at Sex on the Peach Cast, and you can also get in touch with me at sexonthepeachcast@gmail.com. Please do continue to like, share, subscribe, rate, and review wherever you listen to your podcasts, and I'll see you next week. Love.